to you, Mr. Duncan Smith. Of course, we know that you very much are a Brexiteer. The possibility of a general election, the possibility of a second referendum, the possibility of us crashing out at the end of March, the possibility of a softer Brexit. Hasn't your plan rather backfired?
Not really, no. I think what happened last night was a general rejection of the arrangement that the Prime Minister has come up with. And I think the key element from her is that she knows that if she wants to get a deal through, there have to be some changes to that arrangement that she's got at the moment. And I was interested actually to hear what your diplomatic correspondent was saying, because if you look carefully what's being said, even Monsieur Barnier made a point that the backstop, he said, had to be credible. Well, I saw and met with Monsieur Barnier and Sabine Weyand and their team. We gave them what essentially they asked for, which was a protocol which would have replaced the existing backstop and become the backstop, and they're still sitting on that. And the reality is, at the time, that I genuinely believe, and I think this is the case, that he and the others know very well that the problem they face is that this backstop has caused most of the reality of the vote last night, and therefore changing that would actually be the right way to go. Now, they're going to engage in negotiations one way or the other, and we believe that actually there will be some movement. I'm sorry, the earpiece has just fallen out.
I don't know if you're able to hear me then.
Yeah, I can
I'll
now.
let you pop that back in, otherwise you won't be able to hear my questions. But what about those around the country? And we've spoken to people here in Bristol, business leaders, who say that this uncertainty is no good for anybody. What about those around the country who voted to leave, who were happy with Theresa May's deal, and who you have stopped getting their way? And some of those may say that you're being a little petulant, that if it's not exactly the way you want it, nobody can have it.
No, this is a proper debate, and it's not being petulant. Petulance is when you just kind of dismiss something. We're not. What we've already said, and I've said time and again, I said a year ago, that if you agree to the backstop and to the 39 billion payment without any attachment to a final arrangement, then you will not get a reasonable deal. And in actual fact, that's where we've ended up. And so what I know from Mrs. Merkel's office, I know from a number of capitals, they're now saying there needs to be a negotiation. And that negotiation needs to get the European Union to recognise that if they want an arrangement, and I believe they really, really do want to have some kind of departure arrangement, and they don't want to have us necessarily leave without one of these arrangements or deals, then they've got to be prepared to change their approach to a couple of areas within the arrangement at the moment. And the clear and classic area is with the backstop. The backstop itself has caused a huge uproar because it divides Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom, leaves it locked into the European Union, which breaks the whole principle of protection of the Union and means that they're not within the single market of the United Kingdom. And that is a big, big problem. And there's also the issue of the money. But my point is that Monsieur Barnier, when I saw him about 5 or 6 weeks ago, maybe a bit longer, was very clear that they were looking for an alternative to the way that it's structured at the moment. And I think, therefore, there is a way. Now what we have to do is get them to put that into the agreement, make sure the backstop is fundamentally changed without those provisions that you can't leave it. And then you have your chance of an overall arrangement, which needs to be done. All the rest of it is just speculation.
But we've heard from Europe today that they feel that the deal that there is cannot be bettered. What if Parliament is unable to reach any kind of agreement on this? What if next Monday Theresa May comes back and there isn't a plan that she can get all of her MPs behind? What if we go to a second referendum? And what if Remain wins?
Well, we can go on doing the what-ifs. The only one thing that is a reality is that we have an agreement at the moment which doesn't work for the House of Commons. The European Union, they say it can't be bettered, but that's a judgment call, really, at the end of a negotiation. So what I do know is that they're saying there needs to be a negotiation.
Sorry to interrupt, but they think that the negotiations have ended. They think that they've got there.
No,
they got there. Theresa May thought she'd got there.
No, they don't. What you heard quite clearly from Germany today, from Mrs. Merkel's office for the first time, and also that's been going on inside the Commission, I know, behind closed doors, that they recognise there will need now to be a negotiation about what is on the table. And that will happen. And by the way, the Monday, don't get confused about there being some absolute drop-dead point on Monday. There is not. The Prime Minister is only expected to come back and explain what she's going to be doing, and she will do that. But that doesn't mean that she has to have some kind of vote over whether she has to go through with it or not. She's going to do it, and then she'll bring back at some point an agreement which I believe and hope will be significantly modified so that it is acceptable, and it will be acceptable to the party, her Conservative government. And in that case, we will then be able to get on. But we need to make those changes, and that's what a negotiation is all about. And by the way, the European Union never really gets on with something until it actually realises that the alternative is staring it in the face and they don't like it, and that's what's happening now.
I mean, that is a message from Angela Merkel, but that's very different from Michel Barnier, who this morning said that he felt the best compromise had already been reached. The future of what happens between the UK and the EU isn't down to Angela Merkel, is it? It's down to the EU as well as us.
Well, don't underestimate the importance of Angela Merkel's intervention. She hasn't said anything. She's simply supported the Commission's position up to now. And by the way, Monsieur Barnier will express the view that he thinks that this is a good deal, but that doesn't mean that they won't then negotiate to actually make the deal better as far as both parties are concerned. And that means the UK has to find it acceptable as well. So Mrs. Merkel's intervention is very important because they are a very dominant nation inside the European Union. And if they say that there has to be further negotiations, you can be absolutely certain that those negotiations will now take place. And that's what the Prime Minister has already recognised. And as she said today in the vote of confidence, that she intends to put together what she thinks are the areas that people most are concerned about and take them back. And in a question that she had today from one Conservative about the backstop, she said she would definitely be taking that back, essentially, to the European Union for further discussions about how that can be changed. And that is exactly where she needs to be. It's not alone the only issue, but it is certainly arguably the most significant issue. And I believe it is absolutely feasible, ultimately, if we do this properly, to arrive at a point where we will have an arrangement that works.
As a former Tory leader, do you think the damage that's been done to the Conservative Party over this is worth it?
Well, I don't think there has been damage done to the Conservative Party. Certainly the polls don't tell us that. They say that the Conservative Party is still at least 6 points ahead of the Labour Party.
The Prime Minister is unable to unite half of the party. The Prime Minister is unable to get half of the party to vote for her. That clearly shows there's something wrong with the party, doesn't it?
Well, with respect to the media, they take this out of context. We are engaged in singly the most complex...
This is the biggest defeat in Parliament for the Prime Minister in modern history. We're not taking anything out of context.
Well, you are, because the context of this is that we are engaged right now in one of the biggest changes that we are likely to see in our lifetimes. It was always going to be an issue, that was going to be complex and difficult in a parliament that is not in favour of leave. And this is the point. The majority of the people elected have been elected to seats that voted leave, but the majority of the MPs are actually opposed to leave and wish to remain. That is where the problem has arisen in Parliament, where many of them have been playing a lot of games to try and make sure they bog this down. It was always going to be like that, but the reality here is that we have a negotiation yet to complete with the European Union. The Prime Minister has to recognise that this agreement she had with various issues around it is not the right agreement. But that can be changed, and my point, therefore, is these things always start out like this, and you end up at a point where, frankly, you reach an agreement, and that is what we're going to seek, but we have to get changes made.
OK, Iain Duncan Smith, thank you very much for joining us today on Sky News.